A federal judge upheld an Illinois city crime-free housing ordinance which required private landlords to evict all tenants in a household where one tenant was arrested for committing a felony anywhere within the city limits. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's going over the crime-free housing ordinances. Now, I've covered this topic in, I believe, a couple of videos before because some cities were actually throwing these laws out because they were saying, hey, these laws, they discriminate against, certain races of people. Well, this city in particular, that wasn't what the lawsuit was about. They were, fighting, or they put this law into place, and the tenants were fighting it because they said, hey, why are we getting evicted for merely being arrested for somebody who doesn't even live in this household? So some tenants were getting evicted for people who didn't actually live in their household but were staying there temporarily or whatever, right? And they didn't think that was right. I'm actually a proponent of these crime-free housing ordinances, right? And I'm one of those people who believes that landlords should be given all of the tools necessary to be able to get rid of these tenants who are causing problems within our buildings. But the thing is, right, there are some constitutionality issues that may be involved. Now, I'm not the decision maker on that sort of thing. The federal judge in this case was the decision maker and decided that this law is legal. And, I think it's a good thing personally, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. What do you think of these crime-free housing ordinances that some cities pass that, demand that, hey, if a crime is committed by one of your tenants, you have to evict them? What do you think of that sort of law? Now, personally, if a crime is being committed by one of my tenants in my property, I want to evict them, okay? Or if they've committed some sort of a felony, I want to get rid of that person. I don't want a criminal living in my property. Now, the thing is, though, I do want to make sure they actually are convicted of that crime and not just accused of it, because, an accusation or a charge, being charged with a crime, isn't the same as being convicted. And, that's a pretty different thing in my opinion. And so let's get into this article. So this article is coming from news.stlpublicradio.org, and it says, critics call Granite City's eviction collective punishment. A judge calls them legal. And they're going to go over in better detail than I can. Okay, so let's get into it. Critics of Granite City's crime-free housing ordinance say they will continue to oppose it, despite a recent ruling by a federal judge upholding the law. For years, the Metro East's town ordinance mandated evictions of entire households in response to any arrest, even against a guest or a family member. There's a lot left to be argued, said Sam Gedge, an attorney with the Institute for Justice, which represents two families that faced evictions required by the ordinance. We're looking forward to persuading the Court of Appeals that when it comes to guilt by association, the Constitution says that's not okay. Gedge and the Institute filed its civil rights lawsuit against Granite City in 2019. Around the same time, reporters were also investigating the sweeping scope of the ordinance. In 2020, the Belleville News-Democrat examined 5 years of eviction data. It found roughly 500 people evicted from their homes, but nearly half had never been accused of any wrongdoing. A quarter of the evictions stemmed from crimes that happened outside the home being rented. Yeah. I mean, of course, the crime is not going to be happening inside the home being rented. That's not the question, okay? The question is, hey, one of your tenants was arrested for shooting a man over here on this other street, right? 2 blocks away. Now, do you want that person living in your property? Well, no, I don't. Or, hey, one of your tenants was arrested for selling drugs, but it happened in the other side of town. Yeah, but the person's still a drug dealers, so it doesn't matter if it happened on the property or not. That's the way I see it. Okay, if the crime was committed, then they they need to go. Now, saying, oh well, we're evicting all the family members. You know why they're doing it that way? Because simply put, even if the person isn't on the lease, right, but they are living there in the unit, then unless we evict everyone there, then the person's just going to come back. Okay? We can't just evict one person. Goodness, we want to get rid of the problem, and the problem is that's where they live. So we got to, basically remove that family from there. Now, is this fair? No. But here is the lesson that needs to be learned, okay? If you commit a crime, you're, causing all sorts of trouble, then you face losing your housing on top of that, because we don't want criminals here. Now I'm one of those tough love people. I've mentioned that before, right? Where I'm thinking, hey, we need to make sure that we're not committing crimes because we don't want to get our families evicted from their house too. Goodness. People, they don't understand crime and, consequences of the actions that you commit. Okay. So yeah, but like I said before, there should be a conviction. Amid the scrutiny, Granite City amended its crime-free ordinance in 2020. The ordinance now requires a conviction, not just an arrest or charge, to order an eviction for an off-site crime. However, faced with the civil rights lawsuit from the Institute for Justice, Granite City continued to defend its original crime-free ordinance in federal court. Last month, on September 16th, a federal judge upheld that ordinance, ruling against the tenants who had sued after facing eviction. In the ruling, Judge Stacey M. Yandel of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Illinois noted that while Granite City asserted that the ordinance was created to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens, the tenants have provided statistics to show that the crime-free housing ordinance may not have accomplished the degree of protection that the city intended. Still, Yandel concluded, those statistics weren't enough to prove that the city had created the ordinance with the intent to violate tenants' civil rights. The plaintiffs suing the city, Yandel wrote, have presented no evidence sufficient to negate the stated basis for the enactment of the ordinance. So yeah, they modified the ordinance because, they saw the flaws in it, which I have no problem with. Good intentions, but then you realize, hey, this is probably not the way we intended it to go, and you made a change to it, right? But they defended the original ordinance in court after they got sued, and guess what? The original ordinance was legal as well. Okay, they never intended to violate anyone's civil rights. They were just trying to create a crime, a lower crime area. And you know what? They can pull all the statistics up they want, right? But at the end of the day, it's kind of like saying, oh, you know what? Crime, if we lock people up in jail, it doesn't prove that crime is any lower. Well, the only way to prove that would be if we didn't lock people up in jail, right? And if we didn't lock people up in jail, then we'd have, just tons of crimes committed. But nobody wants to stop doing it in order to figure out, well, if it, actually would make a difference. So I don't like the idea that, simply put, they pull these stats out, right? You can make the stats look any way you want them to look, but would the crime have been higher without that ordinance? Perhaps. Okay. And if those people have to, if those people who are committing the crimes, they get evicted from one building and then they just move to the other side of town, yeah, and they're still committing their crimes within that city, then yes. But if the people who are committing the crimes move out of the city or move to a different area far away, or maybe if they stop committing crimes because the ordinance is in place, then the ordinance worked. Okay, so interesting stuff here. I wanted to go over it a little bit and talk about these crime-free housing ordinances again, because I just want to see what other landlords think of it. And let me there's a link in here that actually talks more specifics of what this law says, right? And let me see, because I was kind of curious what exactly the law says. So it says, at all relevant times, Granite City had in place a crime-free housing ordinance and a crime-free lease addendum that required private landlords to evict private tenants if any member of the tenant's household committed a felony anywhere within city limits. Right? So, yeah, any member of the household commits a felony anywhere within city limits, and the landlord had to evict that tenant. That is an interesting law. I guess that at least this federal judge thinks it's legal.